I'm Deborah Bogar, facilitator for this one-hour NACD Urban and Community Conservation webinar on urban agriculture conservation. This webinar is being recorded and would be posted on NACD's website along with a presentation PDF for your future access. Everyone should be connected online to see the presentation, and you can access audio via your computer or by phone. Those directions were sent with your confirmation email. As this opening slide indicates, all lines are muted except for the speakers. I'll open the chat area after the presentation so you can type in your questions and comments, and we'll take as many as we can. You might want to jot those down during the presentation. In this webinar system, and especially now since it's really being used widely across the country, the transitions will take a few seconds as the slides load, so don't worry that it's your computer. We'll start with comments from our host, Ron Rohal, chair of NACD's Urban and Community Resource Policy Group, which is a subcommittee of our Natural Resources Policy Committee. Ron?
Good morning, and I welcome all of you to the monthly Urban and Community webinars offered by the National Association of Conservation Districts through the support of our sole sponsor, the Scotts Miracle-Gro Company. Sessions are designed by NACD's Urban and Community Resource Policy Group, a subcommittee of district officials and partners, guiding the association's services and support district's work in developing areas. Our goal through these webinars is to help districts share what they are doing nationwide and enable them to learn from each other and various agencies and organizations. And we appreciate the support of the Scotts Miracle-Gro Company for making them possible. I invite you to let us know what you think about each webinar and what other topics you would like us to cover by contacting NACD staff or Bogar. And please tell our NACD officers what type of assistance you would like from your national association for your urban and community conservation work. And now I'll turn it over to Deb for the introduction of our speakers.
All right, thank you, Ron.
You're welcome.
And Ron, just to let you know, we're getting feedback from your phone. There we go. All right, today we have two speakers for a presentation by the Prince George's Soil Conservation District in Maryland. Steve Darcy is a fourth-generation farmer with lifelong experience managing family-owned farms in 5 southern Maryland counties, raising a variety of crops and livestock. He has been employed with Prince George's Soil Conservation District since 1986 as a soil conservation engineer and district manager since 2013. Steve is a certified professional in erosion and sediment control, a Maryland nutrient management consultant, and a licensed restricted use pesticide applicator. He is a member of the American Soil and Water Conservation Society, the Crop Science Society of America, Local Farm Bureau, Forestry Board, Ag Advisory Board, Ag Land Preservation Board, the Maryland Secretary of Agriculture's Soil Health Advisory Committee, and the Governor's Patuxent River Commission. And he is the first Maryland Soil Health Champion for NACD. Kim Rush Lynch has been under the influence of food from field to fork for over 25 years. Through this addiction, she has cultivated a variety of careers in the food system, including agricultural marketing, farm and food policy advocacy, nutrition and food education, farmers market management, production agriculture, and soil and water conservation. Currently, Kim is the Urban Agriculture Conservation Planner for the Prince George's Soil Conservation District, where she assists urban farmers with designing and implementing best management practices to improve soil health and water quality. Kim chairs the Prince George's County Public Schools Environment, Agriculture, and Natural Resources Program Advisory Committee, and is a member of the Prince George's County Food Equity Council. Most recently, she became a certified Chesapeake Bay landscape professional. I think you'll all agree that we have some very experienced and talented folks with us today. Steve and Kim, I'm loading your slides now. When they come up on your screen, you can take it from there. Again, this may take a little bit.
There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Steve Darcy speaking. I want to first thank Deb for facilitating this, and she and Ron have been doing such a wonderful job putting these webinars on every month. And so today, with my colleague, Kim, we're going to tell you a story about our soil conservation district and our newest program, Urban Ag Conservation, and how this new program has enabled us to reach out to a historically underserved sector of the county, a group of citizens and residents that traditionally we really didn't work with, and how we have worked through the process of getting local legislation passed to help facilitate our program reach more citizens and continue developing and implementing locally led soil and water conservation throughout the county. Let me see if I can, where is my button?
There you go. The arrow's down in the lower left. There you go.
There we go. Deb is here to keep us straight. So I always like to give a little bit of background so everybody gets a flavor for, our particular county. Prince George's County, Maryland is one of the wealthiest jurisdictions in the nation. We're actually ranked 92nd out of the top 100 counties for median income nationwide. We're a rather large county with about 499 square miles, just over 300,000 acres, and we're pretty densely populated with over 900,000 residents on that 319,000 acres. We still have a large section of the county that is rural agriculture, and about 60,000 acres total, and over about 72% of that is still privately owned. With recent legislation that has been passed by our county council encouraging urban ag, we now have over 250,000 acres in Prince George's County, Maryland that are eligible for agriculture. That's including urban. So, of course, as a soil and water conservation district, we're concerned about soil health. We're concerned about water quality improvement. And so in Prince George's County, we have some of the best soils in the Mid-Atlantic region, and our soil types range from coastal plain up to Piedmont type soils in the northern part of the county. We do have an issue with Marlboro clay outcrops. For those who are not familiar with that, those are high plasticity soils, clay soils that cause a lot of problem with development and slope failures. We also have quite a few outcrops of acid sulfate soils. Anybody that's familiar with that knows you can't get any vegetation to grow on them if they're exposed. They're very, very hard on concrete and rebar and things like that. So if you unknowingly unearth acid sulfate soils in a development project, you really have a big problem. Some of our urban ag areas have problems with heavy metals in the soil, so we're working closely with our urban ag producers on identifying those heavy metals. And then overall, our county is over 80% highly erodible soils. Our water resource concerns. Of course, everybody knows that the Chesapeake Bay is a national treasure. Maryland farmers and developers and everybody that's using the soil and water resources in the state are held to a very high standard, trying to improve quality of the Chesapeake Bay. And there are 10 tributaries that drain to the Chesapeake Bay in the whole Chesapeake Bay watershed. And the Potomac, Anacostia, and Patuxent rivers run through Prince George's County, Potomac being to the west, Patuxent being to the east, Anacostia being in the center. And Maryland, of those 10 tributaries that go to the bay in Maryland, we have 3 of those major tributaries. And each of those has some level of impairment. Of course, we have a lot of development in the county over the last few decades. And these impairments include sediments, of course, and nutrients. They also, we have some problems with PCBs, and those are polychlorinated biphenyls. And a lot of that is from earlier decades of industry in the county, paints and roofing materials, electronic components, things like that, and some other light industrial. We also have issues with some fecal coliform and low oxygen biological activity. And something that I didn't know until I did some research in the central part of the county around the Anacostia and tributaries to that river, we have a problem with heptachlor epoxide, which is an old pesticide. It's an organochlorine compound used in pesticides, and I'm not really sure where it came from. I have a sneaking hunch that perhaps there was some industry doing pesticides years ago. The problem with that chemical, it has a long life in the soil, and it's easily taken up by plants. And so many of the urban ag areas that we're working in are contribute directly to these tributaries and these impaired waterways. So let's talk about why let's set the stage for urban ag. So as we started looking at the urban ag movement in the county, we wondered how we as a district might play a role in promoting the industry while increasing soil and water conservation programs. So urban ag has been around for a long time. Our first community garden in the county was 1980, and that was through Maryland National Capital Parks Commission. And then in 2009, many of the community leaders held town forums to discuss with county leaders how they could improve the lives of county residents. And some of those things they wanted to look at were increased opportunities for outside activities, increasing access to healthy foods, improving water quality, preserving open space, things like that. And in 2010, the first official Prince George's County urban farm, Ecocity Farms, is a stakeholder and a partner with the district, was founded. As we move forward, the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission issued a very interesting book. It's a 163-page report on the history of urban ag in the United States, and it examines the growing urban ag industry in the county, and it is a very good read. I encourage everybody to get online and look it up and get yourself a copy. It's well worth reading. Don't mind that. I think a bird just hit the window, so everything is just fine. So there's another one. So why urban ag? Even before the COVID-19 outbreak, so many communities in our county are struggling, have been struggling with food insecurity, a lot of chronic disease, limited opportunities in outdoor recreation. So we saw these as opportunities to really work with the community and promote our programs at the same time. About 15% of the residents in the county have food insecurities. Many of our grocery stores lack high-quality, healthy food. And believe it or not, within the inner beltway, where a lot of our urban areas are, that 55% of food retail outlets are unhealthy or fast foods. And even outside of the beltway, there's a large percentage of fast food restaurants. 12% or so of our residents participate in government-funded food programs, and 61% of our students in public schools are receiving free and reduced priced meals. So there's a social issue there with our urban ag. That's one reason we're looking at it. And we want to try to improve the overall health, improve soil health as well as human health, and improve water quality. And also there is a great opportunity for economic development. Prince George's County, as you'll see in a map that Kim will be showing, we border Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, on two sides of Washington, D.C., and we're only within about 30 miles of Baltimore City. And there's an estimated $26 billion spent on food in this Baltimore, Washington region, and only 2% of that is spent on locally raised food. So with those factors in mind, we thought, hey, you know what? Let's see what we can do to promote a program. NACD had the opportunity for a capacity building grant, and we were lucky enough to get approved for that in 2017. And so now we fast forward to today, and I will turn it over to Kim, and she's going to give you an update on urban ag policies within the county.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Steve. So I'm just going to talk to everyone a little bit about some of the legislation that has taken place in the county over the last couple of years, just to give you a sense of where we are and how we got to this point. Just going to quickly go through this. After the Urban Ag Report was released, shortly thereafter, there was our first urban farm definition that was created, but it was really for limited zones, so not a whole lot of urban farms could take advantage of that. And this is interesting because this is also around the same time that our Food Policy Council was launched. Then in 2015, we had some very forward-thinking council members who thought it would be great to incentivize urban farmers, to locate in the county and to start businesses. So they wanted to do some sort of financial incentive and created a property tax credit that the Soil Conservation District worked on along with the Food Policy Council and University of Maryland Extension and Ecocity Farms. The one little glitch is at the time we knew that only so many folks could really apply for this because of the limitation of the urban farm definition, but council was excited about it. We had the political will, so we moved forward with it, and it was great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the details of that shortly. So then in 2016, the council agreed that it was time to expand the urban farming definition, and in that, I will talk a little about what's allowed and the zoning and the uses. But in that legislation, they wanted their farmers to have some oversight, to know what they were doing, because they were still concerned about complaints from neighbors and people not quite understanding what's happening in their neighbor's yard. So they named the Soil Conservation District as the technical agency that the urban farmers, they would ask them if they would, become a cooperator of the district. And in order to get that tax credit, they had to become a cooperator with us. Now, we are a voluntary agency, but essentially, they didn't necessarily have to work with us, but if they wanted that tax credit, then they needed to do that because we were the certifying agency, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Moving forward in 2017, Steve and the Soil Conservation District applied for NACD's Urban Ag Capacity Building Grant, which was fantastic. We hugely thank NACD. So that allowed the district to hire a part-time urban ag conservation planner. And at the same time, we also were able to sign a 3-year contribution agreement with NRCS. So that got the program off the ground, and at this point, Soil Conservation District was able to work with County Council and the Food Equity Council to get a full-time position to oversee the Urban Ag Conservation Program, and I am very fortunate to be here. And later on in 2019, so this person started in 2019, me, and then later on in 2019, we have the passage of the another version of the urban farm definition, and which expanded it even further, and I will talk about that momentarily. So in terms of what we're looking at right now and what's allowed, basically the urban farm allows for nonprofits cultivating fruits, vegetables, herbs, and cut flowers. It also allows for beekeeping, composting, and agricultural education. Farms are allowed to locate in residential, commercial, and industrial zones, and I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. And this latest definition also, before only residential zones were allowed, and it expanded into commercial and industrial, and then also allowed for rooftop farming and controlled environmental ag. And this is a map of all of the zones. All of the colors that you see are where urban farms are allowed to locate in Prince George's County. A lot of the green areas are properties that are ag assessed, and also some of the more rural areas. Up in the north, that's actually the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center, that big swath of green up there. But this is an exciting map that we love to share because it shows that 79% of our county is zoned for urban farming. And, essentially either rural ag or, urban ag are locating in these zones, but all of them are zoned for urban agriculture. So if there are smaller parcels, and I'll talk about the priority funding area a little bit, that fall into, even a slightly rural area, but as long as they're in that priority funding area, they can take advantage of that tax credit. And again, this is a map that demonstrates what Steve was talking about in terms of our neighbors. You can see where we're located right next to the District of Columbia. You can see the Patuxent River and the Potomac River, right next to our county and some of our surrounding neighbors and jurisdictions. We're really a prime location right between Baltimore and D.C. So the Urban Ag Property Tax Credit, basically you need to gross $2,500 worth of product. We recognize that some of our urban farms may not be selling that amount specifically, but they may be donating it as part of their, community food security program. So it was just that they had to be producing that particular value. Also, the property must be between 1/8 of an acre and 5 acres and located in what Maryland defines as the priority funding area. And the tax credit is for up to $5,000 per property, and there's a total cap of $100,000 for the program. Council did say that they would look at that if we, hit the cap or the ceiling, they would take another look at it. So now I'm going to kick it back to Steve for a few minutes, because he is going to tell you about what we did with the Urban Agricultural Conservation Grant.
All right. So there's a process. If some of those that are on the call may have been through the grant process, some are maybe thinking about it. I tell you, it was a pleasure working with Deb and everybody at NACD. We entered into, we did an RFP in May of 2017, and then we did our memorandum of understanding in August of 2017, and then we did a final report in April of 2019. So at the end of the presentation, if anyone has any questions about that, I'd be glad to review that with you. So, when we put our program together, we wanted to mimic our existing rural ag program because that's what we're comfortable with, and that's what we know works. And so what we did was we tweaked that program to fit into this urban ag conservation program. So some of the goals are similar to what you'd see in a typical rural ag conservation program, and then there's some other goals that are atypical. So some of the typical goals would be, of course, developing soil conservation water quality plans, implementing best management practices to address soil erosion, nutrient management, improved water quality, things like that. provide education, outreach, promote conservation. But then it gets some of the not normal things would be providing guidance on soil testing, both for fertility, but also for heavy metals and trying to identify those areas. Also advising on permitting issues and zoning challenges, and utility locations. You know, in an urban area, you may have electric, gas, water, fiber optics, and so we don't want our urban producers, you know, taking a spade out there and digging down and all of a sudden running into problems with the phone company or, God forbid, a gas line. So we're working with those producers on utility location. Then, of course, the property tax credit verification, and then providing training with some of our partners. We're cooperating with those folks like Ecocity Farms, University of Maryland Extension, local community college on urban ag training for urban ag producers, and of course helping these producers work through the NRCS EQIP application. We've got several, probably almost 10 now, applications in the process. Some have already been executed and awarded for high tunnels. So that has been a big, that has been a very positive part of the whole program. So within a year of finishing our, going through our grant, we conducted, this says 96, but I do believe the final report said 101 property visits. We signed up 12 new urban ag cooperators, and we developed 12 soil conservation water quality plans and processed 4 high tunnel applications through EQIP. As Kim talked about, we worked with property tax credit applications, and we also developed producer profiles for each of these people, each of these producers that we were working with. We provided support to Ecocity Farms, University of Maryland, the urban farmer training that I talked about. And one interesting thing that I want to point out, if you're managing a soil conservation district, and your mission, of course, is to develop and implement soil and water conservation programs, you also need operating money. You need funds to function. So as a result of our work with this program and this grant, NRCS actually reached out to us and asked if we'd be interested in a 3-year, $60,000 contribution agreement. Well, we said absolutely, we're interested in that because we want to take those funds and try to continue to build our program. So that was an unforeseen benefit that we did not anticipate, and so far we're, I think, a year into that contribution agreement with NRCS. So for every plan that we write, for every newsletter that we do, for every event, there's a whole list of deliverables. We invoice NRCS every quarter, and they send us money back pursuant to the agreement. So some of the other accomplishments, it really opened the door for open communication with our county council members, with our Park and Planning Commission. The DPI that you see there, that's the Department of Permits, Inspections, and Enforcement. So we're working very closely with them because you have to think about issues that could arise in the community, like with plastic and with high tunnels and other things that might occur on an urban ag farm in a community. So we're working very closely with those folks. And then, of course, FEC, that's our Food Equity Council that Kim is a part of, and they have been such a great support for our programs, and we work very closely with them. And then another thing that came out of this exercise, at the same time, NRCS in the state of Maryland recognized the importance of the urban ag and urban ag conservation, and they purchased an X-ray fluorescent analyzer. And this is a picture of at Cherry Hill Community Garden. That's our oldest community garden in the county. And that young lady there beside me is Val Cohen. She is a soil scientist with NRCS. And if you look at the instrument there, it looks like a small triangle. It's basically an overgrown, the thing that you use to at Home Depot, to scan. It's like an overgrown scanner, yeah. And so you dig your little soil pit 3 inches deep or 4 inches, whatever you want. Put it in a little pile. Put a piece of plastic over. Put the analyzer down. Pull the trigger. In 30 seconds, you get real-time readout for all the metals that are in that soil. So we can take a quarter-acre plot and spend a half a day and do a grid system, and we can tell that producer if they have any potential issues with heavy metals. That is very important. So, we're going to look at soil depth to water table. We're going to look at compaction issues. We're going to look at soil fertility. And now we have the benefit of giving real-time values for heavy metals. Our long-term goal in that, and part of the grant that we specified in the grant, was we would like to map those heavy metals in the county and potentially do an overlay to some of the other maps and resources that we have within the county. Some of the key challenges that we've discovered through this whole process is the required building and use and occupancy permits. I talked about issues within the community. For instance, dust control could be a problem, noise control, beehives. You'd think everybody would be happy to have honey, but a lot of people are petrified of bees, and maybe for good reason. Maybe they're have an allergy to them or something. It's also neighbor perception, site aesthetics. People may not like the look of a hoop house in their neighborhood. Lack of irrigation water is a big challenge. Overlay zoning has been a challenge. We've had to go back a couple of times and work on that. We also have found that salt buildup in the soils in some of the high tunnels has been become a problem also. We're also hoping that through our efforts with the urban ag producers that we can actually improve the stormwater runoff in the county, especially in these urban areas. Prince George's County is part of a larger picture in Maryland addressing stormwater management and their MS4 permit. So we're hoping that through conservation efforts with these ag producers, we can actually improve some of that. And believe it or not, chickens are a big problem in a lot of the legislation that Kim was talking about. Absolutely no roosters, and we haven't been able to convince the local legislators that chickens are a viable part of urban ag, but we'll keep working on that. I just want to make one comment. If you're interested in trying to build a program, the two gentlemen pictured here, the one on the left, the gentleman on the left is Joseph Hamid, and the gentleman on the right is Larry Holmes. Both of these gentlemen are retired district conservationists, USDA, NRCS. If you have a program that you're trying to build or a grant, I would highly recommend you reach out to NRCS and try to utilize those resources. Between Larry and Joseph, I worked with both of them over my career. There's probably 100 years of technical experience between those two gentlemen, both in rural agriculture and also urban agriculture. So I just want to put that plug out there for USDA, NRCS. Their retired staff are very highly motivated and very well trained and a great resource for any district. Now I'll turn it back over to Kim.
Thank you, Steve. So Steve's already talked about some of the services, that we provide, throughout the presentation. This year, I think we focused a lot on some of the mentoring opportunities and connecting our urban farmers with those and other training opportunities, as well as potential funding sources, and of course our financial incentive programs with NRCS. But I'm going to keep it moving here so we can get to some of the other fun stuff. Let's see, my arrow's not working. There we go. So some of the additional accomplishments post-grant, you can see here. I wanted to just highlight a few of them. We've worked with over 50 stakeholders, over the last year with technical assistance, and that's everything from, again, working with our county council and our local food policy council on legislation that affects urban farmers. It might also be farmers market legislation. We've also worked with our local farmers markets as well. A lot of them are looking for farmers, and this is a great marketing outlet for an urban farmer to learn a little bit more about marketing channels, to hone in on their business plan and really understand what their customers like, for example. We've delivered 65 outreach opportunities, and this is through a variety of trainings. I'm going to talk a little bit about one of our Bloom and PGC workshops in a little bit. It could be, feedback at county council hearings, and also we've presented at a few local and regional conferences about our work with the program and also highlighting some of the enterprises that are in Prince George's County. And I will get to a few of those examples in a moment. One of the fun things that we did this year is, again, Ecocity Farms. We've mentioned them a few times, being one of our partners. Well, they have an Intro to Urban Agriculture, Commercial Urban Agriculture course in conjunction with our community college. And that is a classroom component, and then, of course, they have the hands-on classroom component through the rest of the year at their farm. Well, we worked with the community college to develop a soil health badge for their urban ag course. So we're really looking forward to, working with some of the trainees and helping to certify them this year. And finally, I think Steve had mentioned at one point us working with a company called GeoDecisions to utilize their Practice Keeper software to really tailor it for our urban ag conservation planning program. Next, I'm going to get a little bit into some of the outreach and education opportunities that we've been involved in. Here are just a few examples of, it might be, again, exhibiting at something like Rooting DC, which is a large urban farmer and gardener conference that's in the District of Columbia, but, it pulls urban farmers and gardeners from the surrounding region and usually has about 2,000 participants. We also work with our county's Summer Youth Enrichment program. We have some students that are featured right there. They were doing some soil testing at one of our farm locations in our rural tier. And some of those students come from our local FFA chapters and the Environment, Ag, and Natural Resources program that I'm going to talk about in a moment. We've also worked with our farmers markets and helping to, provide feedback on funding for programs like the Maryland Market Money Program, which is a double value coupon program for farmers markets, where those on food assistance benefits, they can come to the market and double the value of their purchases. And so, we, of course, are partnering with our partners to talk a little bit more about the benefits of urban ag and food security, but this also is a win-win for our urban farmers because it's more, money in their pocket at the end of the day. These are just a list of a few of the stakeholders that we've been working with. We've already talked about the Food Equity Council. Steve and I also sit on our regional ag work group within the Metro Washington Council of Governments, and we're obviously, talking about what's going on in Prince George's County agriculture, but a large part of that, of course, is what's going on in urban ag and making sure we're highlighting those stories. They recently produced a report called What Our Region Grows 2.0. There was an earlier version back in the, mid-2000s. So that might be something you want to have a look at. It's on the Metro Washington Council of Governments website. Of course, we've worked with the County Council on, providing feedback for a variety of legislation. The school's Environment, Ag, and Natural Resources Program Advisory Committee is something that is very near and dear to our heart. We have 3 schools in the county that have an Ag and Environmental Science program, and those schools also have FFA chapters. And so these students are getting all kinds of career development opportunities in those particular fields. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. And we also partner with our Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Commission on a variety of initiatives, and I'm going to be talking about an exciting one pretty soon in the presentation. So the high school Environment and Ag and Natural Resources program that I mentioned, we do a variety of things in terms of providing technical assistance, at their school gardens or farms, even maybe, working with them a little bit in their greenhouse or connecting them with others who have that technical expertise. We've provided funding support or helped to identify funds and grant opportunities for them, identified speakers that can come into the classroom and field trip sites, and also we've been judges at some of their, competitions, like their regional FFA competition. One fun thing that we did this season, one of our schools has an annual plant sale to raise money for their program, and unfortunately when COVID struck, that was pretty much taken off the table. So they couldn't hold their plant sale, which meant no revenue for this year. So the Soil Conservation District offered to take those plants and try to get them into the community for them, and we partnered with one of our local districts, one of our local council members. We also partnered with UMD Extension, the Washington Gardener magazine, and our Maryland National Capital Park and Planning, and many of these seedlings were given with the giveaway meals, the grab-and-go meals, both for the schools, also the ones that are, the various community centers that you can see listed here. And so that was a great program. We were able to donate over 18,000 vegetable and herb plants and house plants. And then in turn, the Soil Conservation District made a donation of over $3,600 back to the students' FFA chapter. And this is something that, we did this year basically out of necessity, but we realized we want to make this, something that we do on a more annual basis. So more of that to come. I mentioned our Summer Youth Enrichment Program. This past year, we took 4 students from Gwynn Park High School, and these are students, that's a school that's a part of that program I just mentioned. And these are a couple of shots of them in action during the summer. They testified on the Urban Farm Bill and did a fantastic job. It was a great leadership opportunity for them and public speaking opportunity. They learned about conservation planning principles, and they learned a lot more about soil health practices, even pulled together, some maps off of our PG Atlas program, and they delivered regular presentations on their experiences, especially those when we wanted them to understand a little bit more about our local ag community. So we went ahead and, brought them out to a lot of farms. This is a workshop that we did this winter, and we're hoping to do more. And this one we fortunately got in before the pandemic hit, and we're hoping to do some more of these, post-pandemic. We might do some webinar type things this coming fall, but this was a winter sowing and seed swap. We had 60 register, but 40 showed. It was a free workshop that the district sponsored, but it was a nice partnership with the University of Maryland Extension and the urban farmer, Linda Jones, there featured on the right. She does a lot of winter sowing and has run a couple of seed swaps. She's a master gardener as well, and she has her own urban farm business that I'll talk about a little bit later. But we're hoping to get some more hands-on skill building and networking opportunities built into our program. This is just a resource page, and it's basically an effort of ourselves, the Food Equity Council, Ecocity Farms, and University of Maryland Extension, bloomandpgc.com, and there's a list of, it's supposed to be a one-stop shop where urban farmers can go, and then they are directed to our various organizations for additional resources. Another venture that we were involved in, I was part of this project when I was working with University of Maryland Extension, but I worked closely with the district to help with, hosting focus groups and just, working with some of our existing urban farmers in the county. But this is a guidebook, basically a risk management guidebook for urban farmers, and it was spearheaded by Nia Little, who was the urban ag coordinator in our state with the Extension office. And if you have a chance, definitely check that particular document out. And I'm happy to email anyone a copy of it. The next thing I wanted to mention were some of the enterprises in our county. Many folks wonder, who is it that we're working with? And also folks are interested in the practices that we're working with urban farms on. Some of the conservation practices, just to list them quickly, of course, conservation, cover, crop rotation, cover crop, reduced tillage, contour farming, nutrient management, composting, mulching, IPM. There's actually a lot of practices that you can really chat with our urban farmers about because they're doing, most of them have some sort of diversified operation and they're doing a lot of things. So it's a great opportunity for urban conservation. So this is one of our urban farmers that's in a slightly rural area, but he's still under 3 acres. He is really interested in doing turmeric and gingers. We've worked with him on a couple of projects, and he's been really interested in doing a combination of in-ground and raised beds, and as well as selling those, not just using them on his farm, but also selling those. And his model is to deliver fresh produce and eggs to, basically, he wants to work with a lot of restaurants and direct sales in our county. And that's a picture there of Joseph Hamid that Steve mentioned earlier. This is Mr. Davis. He has a large livestock farm down in Eagle Harbor, which is a rural community in Prince George's County, but he also has an urban farm in Clinton, which is a more urbanized area, and he was one of the first to apply for the property tax credit. And I always love to show the ingenuity of farmers, especially urban farmers, and he actually made his own high tunnel out of livestock wire. This is just a couple of shots of Ecocity Farms. I'm not going to chat too much about them because we did mention them a lot throughout our presentation, but they do provide a CSA for people in their community. They have 2 locations, and one of them is one's on park and planning land, and the other one is actually in front of this apartment complex. And they do a lot of great education work, especially with their beginning farmer training program and some of their youth education programs. Linda Jones, I mentioned her before. Elements of Nature is her program, and she grows a variety of herbs and perennials and makes her own value-added products, so it's a lot of different bath products. She also does some different handcrafted accessories for the home and garden. And so she's retired from the federal government now, just retired this year, so she's really looking forward to launching her business even further. This is also an interesting model. Love and Carrots, they have an urban farm based in Oxon Hill, but what they do is they create installations for a variety of businesses, school gardens, residents, restaurants, etc., in creating edible landscapes. They provide the installation work, of course, but they also do maintenance programs, and then they provide coaching and additional, group workshops. So they're really a nice one-stop shop for folks who are wanting to get into gardening, or they want to even create an urban farm, but they need a little help along the way. So they really have a great model and are all throughout the DC area. This is another model. This is one of our cooperators, Doug Adams with New Brooklyn Farms. He actually has 2 locations as well, one in Mount Rainier. That blue house is the house he grew up in, his mom's house, and he was able to purchase the property next door. In this picture, we have featured his lemon thyme that he grows, and then he sells to our local meadery in Hyattsville. To the right, we have his new Hyattsville farm, which is almost 3 acres, and there he's working with some other farmers. He calls them farmers in residence because he's split between his time here and in Brooklyn, New York. But someone has just planted some apple trees, moringa trees, and some goji berries. And he's also going to be growing rosemary at this site. The apples and the rosemary are going to be for Sang Sua Distillery, which is located in Hyattsville. This is another fun success story. Stephanie Freeman with Pepperly Love and Relish Market. She's located in Mount Rainier. She was actually Doug's first farmer in residence at his Mount Rainier location, and she grows a variety of hot peppers, a large variety of hot peppers, and she sells those dried and fresh, but then she also has a whole host of value-added products that she sells at local artisan fairs and farmers markets and even online. And most recently, she opened a small storefront at a new food hall in Prince George's County called Savor at Studio 3807, and it is the second Black-owned food hall to open in the country. It's a fantastic place, and she actually aggregates also some product from other farmers, other local farmers, to sell in her shop, as well as her own value-added products and her hot peppers. Pale Blue Dot Farm is one of our flower growers. We seem to have more and more cut flower growers on urban farms in the county. And Chris Jones, she sells her flowers, and she is in a zone that's also zoned for general agriculture, so she's able to produce those, have chickens, and she also sells eggs along with her flowers. But she's also in that priority funding area, so she kind of has a sweet spot in the county. So what's on the horizon? I'm going to go through this quickly because I want to make sure we leave time for questions. One of the fun things that we're doing is creating an urban farm incubator with a few of our partners. Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission has some land that they didn't put back into one of their ag leases. They lease to a variety of farmers in the county, but generally they're larger farms. So we've been working with them over time to try to figure out a space where maybe we could develop an incubator farm. And Ecocity Farms would host one of their beginning farmer training programs there, and this would be for sort of the next level up farmer, someone who's not ready or not able yet to buy their own land, but really want to start honing in on their business skills. So Park and Planning has agreed to that, and they've identified an 11-acre parcel in Watkins Mill Park, and I'll show you a picture of that in just a moment. Continuing to provide guidance to our county. One of the permitting, our permitting inspections office on accessory structures. We've already talked to them about high tunnels. The next thing that's on the horizon are shipping containers. There's a lot of interest in shipping containers, so how can we do that and make it as easy for the farmer as possible and least expensive? Also, just skipping through, we're going to work on that chicken legislation for urban farms. We think we have a few council members that are supportive, but we really need to kind of come up with some parameters and regulations and look at best practices across the country to make all of our council members feel comfortable that chickens are an appropriate place for urban farms. We're also working with our Office of Central Services to identify some county land and develop a leasing program for urban farms. So that's in the very beginning stages, but we are very hopeful because the county is very receptive to the concept. We just have to flesh that out a bit more and identify some pilot land that we can then develop leases for. And obviously, we need to continue to engage all of our partners to develop additional resources and policies to support the urban farms. Now that we've been in this program for 2 years, we have a better idea of some of the needs of our urban farmers and what would be best for next steps. This is an overview of, see if I can use this pointer here. Oops. I'm going to drag it over. It got away from me. So right here is the parcel that we're talking about for the Urban Farm Incubator. It's a great location, again, because it's central to the county. There's a church right here. This is a community center, and I believe there's an elementary school operates in there as well. And right here is a community garden. So we're hoping a lot of, our community gardeners and our master gardeners, they're our next urban farmers. So we feel like this will have some great synergy and hopefully inspire some of our community gardeners to, let me see if I can put that back there, to then continue on and maybe become urban farmers and do this as an enterprise. We also are working with Park and Planning now to help 2 of our urban flower farmers come together so they can have a larger parcel on Park and Planning land. So this is a nice area where they both can, one of them is taking 4.5 acres, one is going to be taking 9 acres. They said they might even bring a third farmer in to work together collectively, but they're going to do their own operations, but they're going to handle some of the processing and the distribution together, which is fantastic. So there is an older building that needs some work, but Park and Planning has agreed to do the necessary repairs to make it safe so they can use it as a flower processing center. Next steps as far as technical assistance goes, of course, we're going to continue with that soil health badge certification and continue to help support Ecocity Farms with identifying, speakers and presenters in soil health. Can begin our active follow-up program now that we've got some soil and water conservation plans in the program and on file. We need to really do that active follow-up to help farmers implement that and also try to connect them with the resources to help do that. Steve can talk about this a little bit more, but we're partnering with MDA to develop an urban ag conservation tracker module, and I'll let him talk a little bit more about that at the end if we have some time. And the next step is really to start developing some of these conservation plans, not just for our urban farmers, but also for our community gardens and some church gardens. A lot of our churches are thinking about community gardens as well. Continuing to provide support, of course, for our permits office and host more of those workshops we had mentioned. So with that, I thank you, and I want to kick it back to Steve to wrap up and to thank some of our wonderful partners and supporters, and we'll be around for questions.
Thanks, Kim. That was great. I learned a lot by listening to you. But so real quickly, because we're running out of time, but this is just a slide showing many of our supporters. And here's the takeaway message I want everybody to go home with. These kind of programs, when you're building this kind of program, it does not happen in a vacuum. You cannot do it alone. And I think from our presentation, you see we have really reached out and included a lot of different entities. And I really want to say special thanks to my staff, of course, but also to my Board of Supervisors who take my crazy ideas and let me kind of run with them. And I also want to thank NACD, of course, because they really got us going in the right direction. And then, of course, Maryland has a very strong conservation partnership with USDA, NRCS, and Maryland Department of Agriculture, and, of course, our local government, and then a whole plethora of other folks that we are working with. So with that, I think that is the end of our presentation. As you know, I can talk about farming and conservation all day long, and so can Kim. And we do appreciate the opportunity to share our story with you. We're glad to take questions, and also our email. We have a general email there, pgscd@co.pg.md.us for if you have questions after this. And we also encourage you to visit our new updated website at www.pgscd.org. Thank you very much, and we'll be glad to take questions.
All right. Thank you both. And for our participants, we'll go a little bit longer if we get questions coming in, so don't worry about it being on the hour here. I think that was an awesome presentation, and I really enjoyed hearing about the individual urban farmers, urban egg farmers. Don't often get to see that, so that was fascinating, as well as everything that the district is doing. Looks like we've got our first question here. Thank you so much. Will this be available to watch again and share? And yes, Robin, we are recording this. I probably will have it edited yet today, and we'll have it posted on our NACD website, likely tomorrow, Monday at the latest. When it's available, I will send a notice to all of the registrants. You'll have a heads up on that. Let's see, in the meantime, we've got some folks that are typing in. I'm going to go ahead and ask Steve, if you could just briefly share the background of your district board members, just to get a sense of what kind of experience you folks have on the board there.
Sure. Well, in Maryland, by Maryland law, each district is comprised of 5 supervisors. One supervisor is recommended by the local farm bureau. One supervisor is recommended by Extension Service. One supervisor represents the development or construction industry. And then we have 2 at large, and 1 is represented of the county executive. That's 6, so I misspoke on it. Farm Bureau, Extension, 2 at large. One of them happened to be a contractor on ours, and then 1 represents the local county government. So currently we have a young lady who is in the horse industry. We have an attorney. We have a retired excavating contractor, and we have 2 farmers. Both are livestock hay producers in the county.
Okay, great, thanks. Let's see, from Mark, we've got, what is the average parcel size for one of these operations? So either one of you?
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead, Kim, I'm sorry.
Oh, so basically, urban farms are defined between 1/8 of an acre and 5 acres in our county, but I would say most of the operations that we've been visiting are between 1/4 of an acre and 1/2 of an acre, but they do range.
Okay. From Robin, your work is fantastic and love the radical imagination taking shape. Pretty cool there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robin.
From Evan, it appears most of your work is at the county level. How do the cities factor in?
Well, there are 27 municipalities in Prince George's County, and many of these urban producers, even though it's at the county level, they're occurring within a municipality. So we do work with the municipal representatives within those jurisdictions as well.
Okay. And for our audience, I've switched over to the contact information. So again, you have the website for the district that Steve had just mentioned, and then the individual email addresses. So if you have questions that you think of later or you just don't feel like asking now, you can reach out to them. And I don't see other questions coming in, but I am going to, oh, there's one. From Victoria, do any urban farms partner with local environmental agencies to install solar panels? In 2017, the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority granted the City of Atlanta a $50,000 rebate on solar panels for an Aluma Farms shed, which will be used in farm operations. Kim or Steve, any thoughts on that?
I am not aware of any of our urban farmers using solar. We are certainly encourage solar. We do have some, our county is actually very active in solar facilities coming online. The governor of Maryland has set a goal of, I think, 30% green energy by 2030 and maybe 50% by 2050 or something like that. So solar is growing in the county. I think a lot of the small lots are limited with space, so that may be a factor. But Kim may know, she's working more closely with the producers than I am, but I'm not aware of any that are doing solar.
Yeah, no, at this point, if they have an electric fence, they might have a small solar panel. Ecocity Farms did have a larger solar panel that they used for like lighting and some other things at one point. But we don't have a specific program. Like I'm thinking of something like we have a rain check rebate program, for example, to help folks with installing, stormwater management practices, which some of our farms, would be eligible for. But I think that's a great thought, Victoria, and that's something that I think the district could explore potentially in the future.
And I will comment, over my career, we have designed several solar-powered watering facilities on farms, and so we certainly have the technical capability within the office to provide that kind of design for an urban setting for sure.
All right. Victoria wraps up with great presentation. Thank you so much. And Mark has said the same thing. Thank you. And I don't
Thank you both.
I don't see any others coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and shift over because we are a tad over the hour. Actually, I'm going to babble on here for a second more because I see Judy's got something coming in. And I'll ask the question I have. What's the deal with chickens? Why are people averse to having chickens in the neighborhood?
Well, I know one of the things that was cited, well, a couple of issues have been cited. I know in one of our districts, one of our council members received complaints of sort of chickens running around, not, in their coops or, somehow in a sort of a, contained environment, people complaining about them digging up their garden space, next door. And these are, of course, people's pet chickens, or maybe they're raising them for eggs, the quote-unquote illegal chickens. But another issue that was cited that actually surprised us when we had the discussion with our council members, they were really afraid of, rooster fighting, because apparently there was some level of issue of that in the county that we were not aware of. So those concerns, are quite understandable, but I think that it's something that we can overcome, especially if we start with urban farms. That's sort of our strategy. Let's start with the urban farms who are doing this as a business, and then, we can work with, we have a PG County Hens group that has been advocating for years for backyard chickens, so hopefully some of our work can dovetail with theirs. Steve, you have anything to add?
Well, when people start eating fresh brown eggs for breakfast every day that came 2 blocks down the street, I think the issue of chickens will go away.
I think you're right. Thanks. That's helpful. And so Judy says that was very inspiring. Thank you. And that's perfect for our wrap-up. I'm going to switch to the closing slides. And while that comes up, I do want to say thank you very much to Kim and Steve for a great presentation, and even more so for the cool work that you're doing there, for taking those limited funds and creating such fantastic partnerships and building a really dynamic program. I think it's a wonderful example for our folks. So thank you for making time to share this with everyone today.
Thank you for the invitation. We thoroughly enjoyed it.
Wonderful. And for our audience, I will send you the recording when we do have the, an email when we do have the recording available. And then finally, for everyone, here's my usual wrap-up. We have some information available at our website. That's where we'll post information if we do get funds for another round of grants. Hopefully we'll know by September or October. We'll also get information out to individual districts. And then we do have our network on Facebook. If you have something you'd like to share, send me a one-line description and a web link and a photo, and I'll get it posted for you.
Hey, yeah. Deb, I will say I'm happy to report that the little bird that ran into the window is just fine.
Oh, good. I was going to send you some information after this call. One other thing about the network, we did start a group out inside that network for urban agriculture conservation. So if you go to this link, you should be able to find the link to the Urban Ag group if you'd like to sign up for that. And we're trying to post anything we find about urban ag at that under that group. And then finally, last slide, I invite everyone to join us next month on August 20th